Hello everyone. Well, it was mostly dry during the day today in southern Wisconsin, but late tonight a wintry mix is going to start to push back in, and I do think it's going to cause some issues on the roads for Tuesday. So let's get you to the latest timing, and we're starting at midnight tonight because I think it's about midnight that the wintry mix will start to push in around the Kenosha area. And I do think initially the most common precipitation type is going to be freezing rain. So it'll look like rain, and it is rain coming down, but when it hits the surface with temperatures at freezing or just below, turning to ice. However, already by 3 a.m. or so, I think we're going to start to make the transition away from freezing rain to snow. I still think freezing rain is going to be most common at 3 a.m., but I do think some snow is going to start to show up. And by 7 a.m., I do think it's mostly going to be snow. Some isolated freezing rain still, don't want to rule that out, but mostly snow coming down. So let's talk about what to expect for the Tuesday morning commute. Now notice at 7 a.m., probably no snow or freezing rain. Beaver Dam, Portage, Baraboo, Boscobel, so probably going to be a normal morning commute. But south of there, we're talking about a lot of light to moderate snow. Some pockets of heavy snow, so that's going to reduce visibility. Also, some isolated icy spots underneath that snow from the freezing rain. Not widespread icy spots, but isolated icy spots, especially on secondary neighborhood roads, bridges, and overpasses. So bottom line, if you live south of Beaver Dam, Portage, Baraboo, Boscobel, Madison, on over to Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, if you don't have to venture out early tomorrow morning, if you can just work from home, looking like a good day to do it. Now, if you do have to venture out, give yourself extra time to reach your destination. I'd say it's one of those mornings where you should leave the house about 10 minutes early. That way you can drive below the speed limit and increase your following distance from that car in front of you, and hopefully we can avoid accidents. Now, as far as the peak of the snow, I actually think that's going to occur during the late morning. That's when it'll be most widespread, and maybe a few more pockets of heavy snow. In the early afternoon, we also got to keep an eye on temperatures here. So still around 32 in many locations late morning, but once we get into the early afternoon, yes, snow is still going to be around, but look how in a lot of places now above freezing. So I know this looks like a lot of snow, but you might be surprised that there's not going to be as much as you expect, because especially once we get in the afternoon with temperatures getting above freezing now, some of this snow is going to be melting, so that's going to limit how much of the snow is piling up, and we'll get some melting on the roads as well. We're also not going to be dealing with blowing snow because there's actually not going to be much wind tomorrow, just a light breeze. So that also means no wind chill factor to worry about. And notice now decent light to moderate snow coming down in those more northern locations. But look what happens when we go from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to the homebound commute. Zoop! All gone. I do think it is going to be dry for the homebound commute. Now, what we're going to have to watch out for the homebound commute are still some snow-covered roads and maybe a couple of icy spots, but I don't think it's going to be common because in a lot of places temperatures will have risen above freezing, and those icy spots that were around in the early morning will have likely melted. So I do think it's going to be very, very isolated for the homebound commute, and no new precipitation coming down. So more impacts for the morning commute for sure than the homebound commute. All right, so let's talk about ice amounts and snow amounts, starting with the ice amounts. And notice we've really got kind of three zones for the freezing rain, how much ice we expect. For Madison, Boscobel, Baraboo, Portage, Beaver Dam, Platteville, we're talking about just a couple hundredths of an inch. I do think a little bit more around Milwaukee, Racine, and Kenosha, but still under a tenth of an inch. Where we might see ice accumulation at around a tenth of an inch or a little bit more, it looks like the south central part of the area, really highlighting Monroe, Janesville, and Lake Geneva as the sweet spot for the freezing rain and ice accumulation. So what do all these numbers mean? We don't talk about freezing rain as much as we talk about snow. And when you're talking about freezing rain amounts a tenth of an inch or less, it's more of a nuisance than anything. Far from a crippling ice storm, I do want to make that clear. What's going to be most common is ice forming on plants, on trees. Anything that's outside could get ice to form on it, and that includes cars, I do think we're going to see some ice scraping. So tonight is a good night to park your car in the garage if it's an option for you, so you can avoid that ice scraping. But the good thing about roads, when you're talking about 1/10 of an inch or less of ice, we're not talking about widespread icy roads. In fact, I'd be surprised outside of perhaps Monroe, Janesville, and Lake Geneva, I'd be surprised if we see any icy spots develop on the interstates. With this amount of ice, crews are able to treat the roads and keep up with it, so it's going to be very difficult for icy spots to develop on those major roads and interstates. But we do have to watch out for some icy spots forming on those roads that may not have gotten treated, those secondary roads, those neighborhood roads, bridges, overpasses. That's where we'll have to watch out for some icy spots, but I don't think it's going to be a widespread issue. One area where we're probably going to see the most icy spots, again, the south central part of the area. So that's the freezing rain situation. Let's talk about how much snow and talk about the differences here as well. By the way, one thing I've got to mention, Viroqua doesn't look like you're going to see any freezing rain or any snow. And notice that for the smallest snow amounts are going to be where we're going to see snow for the shortest amount of time. So Boscobel, Baraboo, Portage, Beaver Dam, only looks like 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch. Now, get to Platteville, Dodgeville, Madison, Watertown, also Kenosha, because some rain might mix in and a little bit earlier in the afternoon and cut in on the snow totals a little bit. So for those locations, we're looking at 1/2 an inch to 1 inch of snow. It looks like the sweet spot for the snow with totals of 1 inch to 1.5 inches, Racine, Milwaukee, Lake Geneva, Janesville, Monroe. So to summarize, we expect the biggest impacts, the most snow, the most ice in the south central part of the area, Monroe, Janesville, Lake Geneva, and the fewest impacts in the north central part of the area, Baraboo, Portage, Beaver Dam, the lowest snow amounts and the lowest ice amounts.